Hey everybody, it's your favorite reconstructionists, Eric Brown and Phil Relly, and welcome to episode number 11 of the one and only show, bringing you tips and tricks to working vehicle collision cases from the best experts in the industry every Wednesday. Today's topic is, you done messed up. So grab your expert angle coffee mug and settle in. 3, 2, 1, off we go. Every year, traffic crashes claim the lives of over 1 million people and account for over $500 billion of injuries around the world. A small select group of people, from police to attorneys to expert investigators, are tasked with getting justice for the victims, protecting the rights of involved parties, and ensuring the story is told accurately and honestly. Unfortunately, we believe that is an impossible task without the right team of experts. If you agree, then keep on listening for actionable tips from leading experts across various industries that you can start taking today to elevate your professional game. If you disagree, then tune in anyway and let us convince you with our ideas. We are Eric Brown and Phil Relly, and this is Crash Tech, the Expert Angle. Welcome back to the show, guys. Crash Tech, the Expert Angle podcast is brought to you by Crash Tech Reconstruction Services. If you have an accident that you need answers for, or you think the other side has it wrong, Crash Tech can help. Connect with us at www.crashtechreconstruction.com to submit your case for a free review. Phil, guess what, man? Special show today. We are graced once again with the musical stylings of Chris Wells.
Oh, that's a horrible idea.
He's actually this show today is going to be a musical. We're going to sing the whole way through it.
So, I'm going to sit back and laugh just hysterically.
Actually, for everybody listening to this on audio, you're really going to miss out because me and Chris are going to sing and Phil's going to dance on the video. So, I'm just saying, just throwing that out there.
Yeah, that's not happening.
One bad idea follows another. See what Chris and I have to deal with?
You know what? Actually, though, this kind of leads into today's topic. So today's topic is actually cause versus fault. Yeah. And I would say Phil's probably the cause of most of our bad ideas, and I'm at fault for coming up with them.
That's about right.
So an interesting topic today, cause versus fault, right? And I think a lot of people either A, don't realize that there's a difference, or B, if they do realize there's a difference, they don't really clearly define these and properly investigate them. So round table, here we go. Phil, is there a difference in cause and fault?
Absolutely. Not in every situation, but absolutely.
Stop talking. I was going to Chris.
Shut up.
I'm going to our guest to hear. Chris, difference in cause and fault, yes?
100%, yeah.
Okay, Phil, go ahead. Follow up. What were you saying?
I don't want to talk now.
Thank God. I finally figured it out.
I mean, not in every situation, but just like we've said before, if you have a 2-vehicle crash, every vehicle is bringing something to that event. And I think it's incumbent upon the investigator to look at what each vehicle, each operator is bringing. Just because car A pulls from a stop sign into the path of car B does not mean that car A is cause and fault. What if car B is in a 35-mile-an-hour zone doing 90?
All right. So let me ask you this then. Maybe we should clearly define this. Would it be fair to say that cause isn't necessarily the vehicle? We're not talking about the driver when we're saying cause. We're talking about the action, right? The causative action. So I would say, for me, and the way I define these in my reports is, cause is the action which resulted in 2 objects occupying the same point in space at the same time, regardless of contributing circumstances. Yeah? The action that resulted in the 2 vehicles colliding.
Yeah, that's a good definition of the cause.
So, for instance, and Phil likes this analogy, right? Or this example, I guess you would say, is a vehicle pulling from a stop sign. Your client pulls up to a stop sign, looks both ways, and to the left of him is a hill with a big crest, and a vehicle comes over that hill at 130 miles an hour as your client's pulling from the stop sign, and there's a crash. Phil, what's the cause of the crash?
The car coming over the hill. Oh, the cause. I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't listen to his definition. I went right to the fault. No, the cause of the crash is the car that pulled from the stop sign into the path of the other vehicle.
Right. And,
That's
and
cause.
why is it that caused the crash, that action?
Because it pulled into the path of the other vehicle. If the other vehicle did not have a stop sign, had right of way, let's say it's just a straight through way, then, the expectation would be that the car without the traffic control device should be able to go down the road unobstructed.
Well, and right. And we're going to get into this here in a second because you have a legal obligation to travel lawfully. But yeah, without, if the other vehicle doesn't pull from the stop sign, doesn't matter how fast the vehicle's going.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the other vehicle, regardless, he could be going, as Phil once calculated, 10,000 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And the crash doesn't happen.
No. It takes flight.
Yeah.
But the crash doesn't happen.
Right. That's why we still do these interviews over Zoom, because Phil's in hiding because NASA's looking for him to learn how to build a vehicle that can.
I have uncovered their secret weapon.
So then would it be fair to say the fault then would be the consideration of all contributing factors to determine which driver then contributed more to the collision than the other?
I think 100% your fault is going to always lie buried in the contributing circumstances.
Yes.
100% of the time.
Yeah. And so it's interesting because we brought Chris back for the show because Phil's like, this will be interesting to have 3 different perspectives on this. But see, Chris is just being a yes man. He's not even challenging us on this now.
Yeah. I feel like I'm in trial though with this. To be fair, don't you feel like you're being examined here on the stand, Phil? Every time Eric asks you a question.
No, I feel like my desk is solid. I just feel like bang my head.
So, Mr. Relly, would it be fair to say? Would it be a fair assumption?
But how many times have you seen, Chris, where officers will automatically go to the failure to yield as the scapegoat for cause and fault? They automatically say, well, this one had the stop sign, they pulled from it. They're the cause of the crash and they're at fault for the crash because they pulled from a stop sign, but never look any further to what that other car is bringing to the event.
Oh, yeah, I've had that where they'll call me, seem to like, hey, so I got this guy at fault, and I look, and like the car that hit the guy coming from the stop signs a quarter mile down the road, and I'm like, did he like pull off? They're like, no, that's just where he stopped, and I'm like, we may want to look at speed here. You may have a little bit of an issue. Yeah,
you have 200 feet of skid mark coming into the collision event, and then another 150 feet of post impact skid marks and dragging and this, that, and the other. And well, this one pulled from the stop sign, so they're at fault. They're the cause of the crash. You think?
Yeah, and this really to highlight this. I mean, Phil, you might remember this case. This was a while ago, and this one, I was not happy with this case. First of all, because there's certain, like, we have certain requirements on cases that we will and won't take and things like that. And this is one that we thought was going to work out one way, and it ended up being completely different. But if you remember, it happened here in one of the bigger cities in Ohio. And I go up to look at this scene, and the same thing. It was 2 vehicles going the opposite direction. One vehicle goes to make a left onto a side street, and the vehicle coming the opposing direction hits it, and they both travel off. And I go out to the scene the first time, and I couldn't find the final rest. I'm like, man, I don't see any fluid. I don't see like anything, because typically when the vehicles come to final rest, like, you'll see big pools of fluid staining the road and things like that. And I didn't see any of that. So I left, and then I find out that even though in the report it shows that like the vehicles really only went maybe like 30, 40 feet, the vehicle that was coming the opposing direction went 2 city blocks and through a telephone pole and in a 25 mile an hour zone.
So, I don't see a problem. I mean,
no, I'm thinking 15 to 20 tops.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that's the problem is they did exactly what you did. What you just said, Phil, is the officer marked fair to yield turning left. Right. And they're like, which, don't get me wrong. What's the causative event? The cause is the fair to yield turning left. I'll give you that. Right. Because without it, the other vehicle could have came the opposing direction at any speed, and the crash doesn't happen.
Well, and this goes back to a case which obviously I don't know where the status is, but and you and I have talked about this one a number of times.
Well, then I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Where that's exactly what the investigating agency did. You had a vehicle that, we'll say east and west 2-lane road, westbound vehicle slows to make a left turn into, a side street or what have you. And the vehicle traveling the opposite direction, eastbound, was an extremely high rate of speed, and tags the turning vehicle in the right rear wheel. And the investigating agency automatically went to failure to yield right away when turning left. And I mean, hemmed that individual up something terrible.
Yeah.
And for all intents and purposes, I mean, they could have ruined that person forever.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they're wrong from the fair to yield stance, but they never dug into the contributing circumstances, and that changed everything. Absolutely everything. You went from a felony situation, potentially, maybe, down to a misdemeanor, event, because the other vehicle brought so much more into that collision event that a reasonable, prudent driver most likely would have done the same thing.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of attorneys, though, are afraid of that causation, right? Because I think our reports and reading some of these other expert reports really fail to address this. Most do. There might be some out there that do address this, but most fail to address cause and fault. And everybody just kind of lumps this together into one category. And so when you see our reports and you see that, well, here's the causative action, right? But this person's at fault. And we do get a lot of resistance on that, of like attorneys that go, ooh, I don't know that I want to know the causative action. But let me ask you this, and I'm going to have you consider this, right? Isn't that coming out anyway in trial?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so realistically, if you get on the stand and argue that this guy turned left in front of the other car, right? Or failed to yield when turning left in front of a oncoming speeding car. If that's where we get stuck arguing over, who's losing that fight? Arguably the guy that turned left, right? Because every juror has had that beat into their head. Oh, you got to wait. You have to yield before you can turn left, right? Well, so if that's where we're going to argue, you're going to lose that argument 10 times out of 10.
Well, here's the thing. You can't hide from it. So why are you even trying to hide from it? At the end of the day, when the evidence is presented and, the officers on the stand, they testified, so this car was turning left. Yes. What are you going to get up and argue? No, they were turning right. Right. Just concede it. Just concede it. This person turned left in front of this person, and get off of that topic. Get over it. You can't hide from it. It is what it is. Just accept that fact. Spend your time and energy and spend it on the contributing circumstance aspect of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't even go down the path of, they took off or they started turning at such a slow speed. Stop. Yes, I agree all day long. That car turned left, got hit. Yep.
Right.
Move on. Let's get to the more important topics.
Yeah. And then you can even concede that, right? Because how many times have we gone into court then? Once you start to accept some of these facts, right, that everybody can just agree on them, and then it doesn't become an argument in court. Like everybody's like, okay, you know what? We're just going to concede, and everybody's mutually going to agree upon this vehicle turned left.
Yeah, sure did.
Right? And that turn resulted in the collision, right? That caused that was the causative factor. Everybody agrees with that. So now you go into the courtroom and it almost kind of just gets glossed over, like, because it's not contested, right? Like everybody's just like, yep, here you go. This vehicle turned left in front of oncoming traffic. Isn't that true? Yep. Right. And everybody just agrees and it goes away. But now we can actually put the focus where the focus really lies, which is the speed now of the oncoming vehicle.
Speed, right? or some other action.
Right. Or view obstruction or whatever. Private property had a tree blocking failed to trim their bushes, whatever the case may be. We can start to look into that.
Yeah. Cause I know I've had trials where sitting there and they're beaten to death a point that you're like, yep, and they just keep beating it. And you look at the jury and they're just like, well, yep, they did it. He said it 4 times. And they just quit listening to everything. And now you've lost the jury's attention.
Yeah.
And it's like, just guys, get through it. We know it's there. Like you said, it's coming out. Let's just eat that one and move on to show why that didn't matter.
And you just hit on such a crucial point, Chris. I mean, number one, if any attorney out there, and here comes some hate mail, so direct it to me, I can just press delete. But
we don't read it anyway.
If you think for 1 minute your jury members are so excited to be there, and they are so excited to sit there and listen to you and the other counsel argue and talk and bicker and object and put on this show for your side of the case or the other side of the case, you're delusional. They don't want to sit there and hear that. So they want to get there. They want to get there, hear what I have to hear, get me back in the deliberation room. We'll render our opinion, and I want to go home. They don't understand it. They don't, So the more time you spend arguing about something that is just conceivable, then move on. Get to your real point, because otherwise, like you said, Chris, spot on. You lose the jury, and at that point, once you've lost that jury, you're going to have a hard time getting them back.
And the attorneys don't ever, like, you guys don't get to watch the jury when you guys get into arguments, and then the judge calls a sidebar, right? Because you're all caught up in the arguments. But I do. You ever watch the jury? You ever watch the jury, right? And what's their reaction when both attorneys start arguing and a judge calls a sidebar? And you go off the record? What's the reaction at the jury? They shake their heads, they roll their eyes, like they're irritated.
Well, and now a lot of the courts like ours, they put like that, I don't know, I think they call it white noise, but it's just static to me. So they're listening to this horrible sound so that they can't hear anything everybody's talking about.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's where I know you guys talked about a little bit already in another podcast, but this is where me being on the stand, I love interacting with the jury. I just kind of look at them, smile,
right,
and try to build a little rapport then, because I'm like, they're annoyed with you, but I need them to like me.
Right.
So I just need to be like annoyed with them, like, eh.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, and then when you come back from your sidebar and you get to the point in your presentation where you're now going down that path of digging into the contributing circumstances to start building your case that you intended to do all along, but because you've irritated them so much in the previous, cause portion of it, they are not going to appreciate the fault. Right. Once you start going down the fault path, and that's damaging. I mean, piss off your jury and see how that goes.
Yeah. Now, I will tell you, Phil says the jury doesn't want to be there. I don't know about you guys. Every time I get subpoenaed for jury duty, I go. And I've been trying for 13 years. I've been trying to sit on a jury. And they never pick me because, they're like, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, I'm a business owner. Oh, okay. And I'm like hoping they're just going to leave it at that. And then they're like, what kind of business? Crash Reconstruction. And they're like, crap, we have an ag vehicular homicide case. Sorry, you're out. I'm like, dang it. Like I want to sit on a jury so bad.
Yeah.
And they don't pick
the cases that I've had, where you've been in and you've seen the jury. I mean, like Chris said, pay attention to what your jury's doing. Pay attention to the body language. Yes, they are going to be attentive and they are going to be smiling and happy at the very beginning when everybody's giving their opening argument.
Right, like this is pretty cool. Like they're thinking it's going to be like NCIS on TV or whatever, any of these shows. Yeah.
And then when you start getting into this, this bickering match and so on, and you can, just like Chris said, they're rolling their eyes. They start moving around their seat like, all right, now they start thinking, I'm going to be here all day. I needed to get the car in for an oil change. And now we're going to have to sit and listen to this arguing, bickering. Their mind is in Myrtle Beach, and, you're tangling over,
So what you're saying is that jurors do not appreciate the $12 an hour that they're being paid to be there, or $12 a day. I mean, $12 a day.
Yeah.
You're saying that's not
No.
They're not excited about that.
I think if they could get away with putting a cardboard cutout in the seat in their place, they'd do it in a heartbeat.
Climb out the window, rappel down the side of the building.
Do
with
like
a bed
Major
sheet.
League Baseball, put a stuffed bear there for it.
Yeah, totally.
No,
fine.
I mean, I understand. There are jury members that maybe are retired and don't care, and they enjoy it.
Yeah.
That's not your whole jury. I guarantee you that.
So on this cause and fault thing, let's talk about this a little bit here as it relates to the report. Because the first thing you guys get, right? So potential client calls and they go, hey, I was injured in a car crash. First thing you guys do is order the police report. Or possibly there might be some attorneys that do this out of order the police reports and then contact the drivers. But either way, one of the first things you do is look at the police report. Okay. Yeah. And so when the two places you got to look is, think about it this way, right? Unit and error. On almost any state's report, you're going to have somewhere. Now, some states, some of your commonwealths do not assign error, right? Unit and error. But for the most part, the rest of the actual country. No, I'm joking. For
I feel my blood pressure boiling because I know where you're getting ready to go with this.
Yeah. So unit
infuriates
error,
me.
Yeah, unit and error is typically the unit that the police officer is saying is at fault. Then you're going to have a page that says contributing circumstances or something like that. And that's where they're talking about this is the causative factor. Now, Phil, if for the attorneys reading this report, there is one contributing circumstance that when marked, they absolutely need to call a reconstructionist 100% of the time. What is that contributing circumstance?
Failure to control.
Yeah. Chris,
the default.
Yeah, the problem is Ohio took that off their report now. So if you see a 99 other unknown or something, that's the cops' way of going failure to control. And you'll see it in their narrative.
Yeah.
The other side of that too, though, it aggravates me to no end because it to me, it points to just lack of putting effort in. Is once they say unit one, and most departments, not all, but most departments will, whatever unit in the collision event they believe or they're going to sign as your at fault or unit in error, they make it 01, just the first unit. So they will put your unit one as your unit in error, and then when the information for your unit two will 99.99% of the time will always be the contributing circumstance of one, none. So that car is just like
is beyond reproach.
Yeah, it could be, a tornado, but that car's going down the road in a bubble of sunshine with birds chirping and flowers blooming.
Literally, Jesus is driving that car.
Halos over top. I mean, come on. No, there's something they could have. There's something. Look at all your options. And if it legitimately, and you can say, no, I looked at every single contributing circumstance and none of them really fit, then fine.
Yeah.
Then it might be a 1 none. But, if your driver, when they fill out their OH3 or their statement form, and you ask them, how fast were you going? I was going 60 to 65. Okay. Yeah. And it's a 55 mile an hour zone. There's a contributing circumstance for that.
Right. Yeah.
Choose it.
And that's just it. I mean, like, failure to control for me is the ultimate cop out for a cop.
Yeah, it is.
Right. That's the ultimate.
Easy way out.
I don't know. I don't care. I don't give a crap. Failure to control, and then unit error of unknown. Right. So, but if you see that failure to control, the reason I say you need to contact a reconstructionist to look at this, right, is because failure to control means that they didn't even have the ability to control. Right. There was no ability to control. And so me and Phil were just talking about this actually last night. You have a vehicle driving down the road, drives off the right-hand side of the road into the grass, overturns in the ditch and kills somebody or something like that. 99.99% of the time, Chris, what's that inexperienced officer? What are they going to mark as a contributing circumstance?
Failure to control.
Failure to control. Phil, what was the
most
cause?
Experienced officer?
Yeah, that's true. These are those. Remember, we talked about crash reports that may or may not be completed in CRAN. These are the ones we're talking about. And so, Phil, but in that scenario, what's the actual cause of the crash?
If it's a marked roadway, then it's going to be marked lanes.
Yeah. Or, I mean, that you failed to operate in your lane of travel. That's what caused the crash.
Contributing circumstance, if it's an unmarked road, drove off the road.
Yeah. Right.
Because the failure to control didn't come into play
until he began rolling. Once the vehicle was rolling, then it was
no matter what that driver did, whatever kind of driver input they did, it wasn't going to matter. It was happening. That's where the loss of control occurs. It didn't occur just because they went off of the roadway. That's not fair to control. That's some other action that the driver did or did not do.
Yeah. And then finally also, so if you see that one, pick up the phone and call.
Yeah.
Right.
You need to dig into that
100% of the time, pick up the phone and call. Okay. And even if it's a single vehicle, right? You have a single vehicle crash. You're like, it's failure to control. Dang, crap. Guess can't work this one. Is the road sloped correctly? Is there appropriate friction value on the road? Is there appropriate signage for that curve? Appropriate signage approaching that intersection? I mean, like, there's so much that you could look into, and that may be beyond a reconstructionist, or not beyond. I'd just say not in that wheelhouse. Remember that whole talk of stay in your lane, right? If it's a roadway issue of a construction or the amount of friction available on the road surface, man, that is in an engineer's wheelhouse all day long. Like, you need to get an engineer involved and be like, hey man, this curve is sloped towards the outside of the curve.
Well, and you look at, you see this a lot in rural crashes, where, the roadway is, there's a grade, positive grade going up a hill, and at the top of the crest, the road, curves off, curves down and to the left or curves down and to the right, and there's no advanced warning sign.
Right.
For it.
Yeah. You come over the top of that hill crest and boom.
The assumption that most people take is that, everybody knows that that's there. Well, what about the person that may be visiting from Texas that's never been down that road before? It's a 55-mile-an-hour road, and they come up over that crest, have no clue that the road's going to do something different. Yeah. And all of a sudden they come to the crest and nope.
Or
you thought it was going straight, but it didn't.
Yep. Or here's one that we see very, very often. And I guarantee if you've been doing personal injury cases at all for any length of time, you have seen this crash report. Okay. And you may or may not have taken the case because you have an agency who will always mark this the same. And so for those of us that ride motorcycles like me and Phil, Chris rides on the back of his wife's motorcycle, I think.
Nice.
But bazinga. Anyway, no, but you get out in the rural country and either you come around a curve or come over the crest of a hill. And on the other side, some street department has ground up the asphalt. And it's now that loose gravel, and the motorcycle slides out, right? And crashes, kills somebody, hurts somebody, whatever. What's that superior agency going to mark on that crash report for the causative factor?
Failure to control.
100% of the time, right? And it's not at all. I mean, you legitimately have a case against whoever ground up that roadway and didn't put signs up that says loose gravel over this hill crest, right? I mean, so think about stuff like that. And that's why when you see a failure to control, it's so important because, when we're looking at and diagnosing these causative factors versus who's at actual fault for the crash, right? It's a big difference. It's a big, and so you not only have I would say the failure to control one, but then your next one that you should be calling on to at least just get an opinion, at least say, hey, take a look at this and tell me what you think, is failure to yield. Mm-hmm. I'd say failure to yield case is your next one because, and almost every state that I've looked at has this baked in. Okay. When you read failure to yield, you have to yield the right of way to any vehicle traveling. How, Chris?
An appropriate speed and for the roadway.
Yeah. In a lawful manner, right? Almost every state defines your right of way as your right to travel uninterrupted upon a roadway in a lawful manner. Right?
Yeah. Yep,
so
absolutely.
So when you have these failure to yield cases, you really got to analyze the other vehicle. And this is where Phil was talking about, right? Is you get that report and, unit number 1 is going to be failure to yield. And unit number 2 is going to be none because they didn't even look at it. They didn't even look into it. And so here's a great tip, trick to go into court with when you start talking to the officer that completed the report. So this be used in deposition, defense trials, whatever. Okay. Is generally when you look at a police report, what vehicle is unit number 1?
Unit air.
The at-fault vehicle, right? Almost everybody makes the at-fault vehicle unit number 1. So I would ask the officer, when did you determine who was at fault at the collision? As soon as you arrived or after the investigation was complete? Right? Because if they put unit number 1 as the at-fault vehicle and you go down this series of questioning and you go, okay, how'd when you do your police reports, what's your department's policy? Because some departments actually have a policy on their traffic unit that says the at-fault vehicle goes in as unit number 1. Right? And so go down. Say, do you have a policy? Yeah. Okay. So you filled out this report and you put that vehicle as unit number 1, right? Yeah. Was that before or after you conducted a complete investigation? Mm-hmm. Right? Have you ever, and then ask them, have you ever had a report where you've had to change the units? Right? Because all you're starting to show is, and police officers, unfortunately, this happens a lot. Right? And we've seen it. And this is one of the nice things about having like our multi-jurisdictional team that we have is you get out there and you run the risk of getting that notion in your head, right? Oh, well, this guy turned left in front of that vehicle, so he's going to be unit number 1, fair to yield, before you even look at anything else, right? And so now you start making all of your evidence fit that narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so you got to be really careful because you have Chris has a fancy term for it. Like your observational bias or something.
Yeah, the observational bias is the big thing that's we always watch for when we're doing our training and testing. And I mean, we had one where it was a left turn case, turned in front of another car, and everybody's like, man, he turned left. And I'm looking, I go, guys, you're going to have a speed issue on that other car. I'm like, you damn near ripped that thing in half.
Yeah.
Like, it's not as clear cut as you think it is.
Well, and you got to remember too, especially for police officers that are completing these reports, they believe everybody operates the vehicle like they do, right? But a police officer is a trained driver, so, and normally they're familiar with their neighborhood. So they're gonna be like, oh, they knew that stop sign was there. Did they?
Right.
I mean, stuff like that. And so you've got to really look at some of the stuff. Don't just take it at face value. Right. And so, like, once I realized that this was an issue for our department, when me and Chris were working together, I started changing the way I did it. And I just say, always, the striking unit is unit number 1, regardless of who's at fault. The at-fault unit could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't care. My striking vehicle is always unit number 1 because I can tell that when I arrive on scene. I know who hit what. Right. But I don't know who's at fault when I'm doing that report.
Yeah. And we adopted that, and it works out well because you can, and it helps you keep track of things. And the big thing with figuring out cause fault when you're looking at the police report is, remember, most cops don't like doing crashes. They were trained by someone who doesn't like doing crashes. Yeah.
This is a secret we're telling you guys.
and the main training aspect you always get is do the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. Sometimes I think they take a little liberty with that stupid part because I'll look at stuff and be like, how did you come up with this?
For any officers listening to this show, direct hate mail to Chris Wells at...
You all know it'll get file 13, so it's fine.
Yes.
So,
well, here we go. So, Phil, final thoughts on the show, man. What do you got? Anything good? Pearls of wisdom.
Wow. I don't know about that, but for the criminal defense attorneys, because they're probably going to get the earliest glance maybe at these cases coming in, because your unit 1 or unit in error is likely going to get charged to some degree, whether it's a traffic ticket or whatever. But for the criminal defense attorneys, I would tell you, when you get that case, it's a failure to maintain control or something that we talked about. You need to find out right now, are both vehicles airbag module capable of being imaged? If so, you need to go after that right now, because I promise you, a lot of departments, if not the majority of departments, are not imaging those. They're imaging them.
Before you do that, go listen to episode 7 about our podcast that's all about airbag control modules.
And I've even run into this where people have called and asked, hey, what do you think? And I'm like, you need to download those airbags right now. Get your warrant and download them. What do you why are we waiting? Yeah, but I already know who turned left in front of who. Okay.
Right.
That tells you the cause part.
Right.
You
Now you need to find out who's at fault. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But a lot of people don't do that, and right there lies a lot of evidence.
Yeah, 100%. Chris, final thoughts, man. What do you got?
Going with Phil. If they're not capable of being downloaded, make sure you got photos or a vehicle inspection on them, because again, that's going to tell you if you got a speed issue. Looking at that damage, like we said, don't take face value about that failure to yield, failure to control. It may not be, again, maybe the cause, but it ain't necessarily the fault.
Yeah. And that's my final pearl of wisdom is going to be, right, if you have a single vehicle crash and it's marked failure to control, those are ones that you really need to have looked at, because something caused that crash. Something happened, right? Typically, you don't see vehicles going down the road that just overturn, right? They just start rolling down the roadway. Right? I mean, typically that's not a normal thing. So something had to happen. And may you run into some that it legitimately is just, guys just drunk or driving too fast or something. Yeah. But there are these cases where poor roadway design, poor signage, poor visibility, poor something, and there's more to this crash that just wasn't even looked at because the officer was irritated. It was raining. It was nighttime. And, we interrupted his lunch break. And he went out there and he's like, single vehicle crash, and just whips that thing out. So those are the crashes really that you guys need to have looked at. So,
well, everyone, that's going to wrap it up for the day. As always, jump over to Facebook and make sure you follow and join Crash Tech, the Expert Angle group. Also, if you want to leave us feedback, have an idea for a show, or would like to be on a future show, head over to Crash Tech Expert angle.podbean.com and click the link on the right that says contact the show. The form will come up. Put anything that you want right in there. If you want more information on expert consulting services or training, visit us online at www.crashtechreconstruction.com. And finally, if you're a PI attorney, make sure you request to join the Crash Site Facebook group. Or if you're a defense attorney, make sure you request to join the Crash Site Defense Facebook group. Neither site contains any ads or spam. It's just a private community that brings experts from all different areas together with attorneys to collaborate or ask questions. So again, guys, thanks for tuning in. And remember, always leave your accident victims better off than you found them, because at the end of the day, everything we're doing is for them.